Oh. Okay, so good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Climate, Energy and Environment Committee. Now, as you may know, I need to find my my right words for this. Due to the current position with COVID, we're holding this as an online meeting, and that means that formally this is a consultative meeting. So the legislation at the moment doesn't permit us to hold virtual formal committee meetings at this time. The regulations that were in place previously in the pandemic expired in May 2021 and they were not renewed. So that means effectively today's meeting is an informal consultative meeting of the committee. It is still being live streamed so that the public and others with an interest can observe and hear the debates. And the papers have been published online and made available in the usual way. Where anything we discuss does require a formal decision, then it'll be necessary for the managing director, that's Ben, who's on the call with us. Welcome, Ben, to exercise his delegated authority and take those decisions having regard to the recommendations of the meeting. That will sound a bit formal, it's because I was reading it out, but I hope you'll all understand the gist of what we're saying. So welcome again to the meeting. Sorry I was unable to attend the first meeting of this committee, and my thanks to Mark for chairing that. So item 1, to note any apologies for absence. Jeanette, do you want to remind me of who they are, please?
Yes, we've received apologies from Richard Goodfellow, from Simon Pringle, from Melanie Taylor, and from Adrian Gill. Thank you.
Unfortunately, Adrian had to send his apologies at the last minute, and that means that item 7, which he would have been presenting from the Environment Agency's work on net zero and adaptation and resilience, unfortunately we will not be able to take that item. So hopefully we'll be able to bring that back for a future agenda item. And note also on item 8, again with Melanie's apologies, that item will simply focus on the presentation from Northern Power Grid and not from Northern Gas. So item 2, to remind members to declare any pecuniary interests that you may have either now or when individual items come up. Item 3, there are no exempt items, so there's no requirement to exclude the press and public. Right, okay, so we don't seem to have minutes of the last meeting on the agenda, which I've just noticed.
No, they'll be brought to the next meeting.
Okay, so because of it being
yes,
informal, presumably. Okay. Perhaps before I go on to the formal agenda, though, I should say, as what I would have done otherwise, as a matter arising, I think you've all been copied into correspondence on behalf of the West Yorkshire network of climate and social justice organisations. So that includes Friends of the Earth and others, on a number of points, but particularly regarding the decarbonisation of transport and requests for that issue to be discussed by the Transport Committee. I know that issue was flagged up, and I think Transport Committee had a very full agenda last time. And I understand that there is a clear intention for them to discuss that. But I'm not sure, Alison, do you want to just add a little bit more background on this for me? So and then notices that Alison, yes, you are there. Sorry, Alison.
Yeah, I am. Sorry, that's fine. Thank you, Councillor Swift. So yeah, the item wasn't discussed at the formal committee meeting, but it's being considered and a full response will be provided by that committee. I'll just leave it there for now, if that's okay.
Thanks. Yes, and I will also obviously talk to Councillor Hinchcliffe, the chair, regarding that as well. I also noticed there's a couple of other points in the correspondence which we might want to look at where they fit into our forward agenda for discussion. But there's a few people want to comment on this. So can I start with Councillor Cooper, Andrew?
Yeah, I just wonder how we best. I've read the comments that came via Anthony Ray, and I'm just wondering how best. Just wondering how best to bring this up under our agenda, because obviously we've got the highways projects which are WICA funded. We have there's the Leeds Bradford Airport issue. So transport is a big problem for us in achieving our targets. So at what point in our agenda are we going to be discussing this, and how best to approach it?
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Let me take one or two other comments and then we'll pick that up. Jack, Councillor Hemingway.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I agree with Andrew's coming from. I think we do need to be really clear at what point this committee is going to be given the opportunity to discuss transport emissions in our programme looking in the future. Obviously, the Transport Committee will respond to the transport specific points that have been raised, but as it is 40% of regional emissions, it's pretty critical that we understand how this committee is going to interface with transport issues. And I think, look, obviously don't want to stray on to the next agenda item, but looking at the forward plan, transport isn't down there once. So I think it's really important that we understand how this committee will be able to look at transport issues as part of the Mayor's climate plan.
Thanks, Jack. Scott, Councillor Patient.
Yeah, I mean, Jack and Andrew have kind of said it really. I mean, just to sort of build on that, it is something I mentioned at the last meeting in terms of what the synergy between us and the Transport Committee looks like and where that sort of overlap lies. I guess doing things in isolation is fine and sort of like ticks half of the box, but making sure we're fully linked up on that agenda, sort of, as Jack said, is going to be like key to managing it, because I think we both need to have our own stance on that and equally a broad stance across WICA.
Thanks, Scott. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to sort of come in with two thoughts really from the previous meeting. I know we don't have minutes here, but I thought we had a very helpful and constructive conversation about the climate plan last time when we met in person. And I think two of the thoughts that we shared, which I've sort of seen in a draft copy of the minutes, firstly, to try to get more clarity about the forward agenda, so we have some time to implement on things. So I think that's great that we've got it as a discussion point for today. And I think the second thing around, how, yes, for transport, but broader than transport as well, this committee could get some oversight almost of all of the different decisions that are taking place across WICA and the overall impacts that this might have to our plan. And that's something that I've had a few very helpful conversations with Liz and others about, and I feel sort of confident that we can include those. But I wonder, with your permission, Chair, if we could sort of also bring in Liz, potentially Alison, to potentially talk about that specific point.
Thanks. Yeah, happy to do that. Liz, shall I come to you next?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. So I think as we've done now one cycle of all of our committees and the different themes, it's quite clear that there's a lot of synergy between them, and climate is one of those very much cross-cutting themes. And so what we were kind of thinking and following on from what Mark was just saying and Mark's proposal is, as well as the specific, and we can come on to the agenda when we come to the forward plan, but as well as those topics, that what we try and do is present to you as a committee that the other things that are happening across all of the committees that have a relationship to this agenda. And I was going to mention a few of those actually when we come to the next paper. And I think that will also then help into the conversation about roles and responsibilities and how this committee interacts. If you at least can see what's happening in the other committees, you can then say, well, hang on, that's something we're really interested in or want to support or want to challenge. So I suggest, Chair, if it's all right with you, is that something that we have as a paper for the committee, which sets out all of those interdependencies and links to the other committees. And when we come on to the next item, and we are looking at the forward plan, if the committee wants a specific conversation around transport and transport emissions, then that I think is something that we can build into the forward plan. If there is, it feels like there's always at least 3 people have said that, but happy to come back to that in the next item.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and getting quite a lot of nods to that. I think people feel we should do that. You know, as the committee system is settling down, portfolios are settling down, you know, maybe a degree of caution about being kind of seen to check another committee's work, but actually I think this is our work, and the decarbonisation of transport, as the point's been rightly made, is such a big part of what has to be done to deliver anything close to our carbon targets. It's very much our business as well as the Transport Committee's business, really, isn't it? So I think that's right, and I think let's pick up exactly where on that. I suppose the other point I'd make is that you know, the next one of the items on the next meeting is the Carbon Impact Toolkit project, and obviously I think we were hoping originally that might have come to this meeting, but I do understand the scale of that work and why it's next time. But clearly that piece of work has some very big implications for the you know, the transport and major transport projects as well. So either of the next 2 meetings, it would seem to me that transport and decarbonisation would fit pretty well on either of those. If people are okay with that, then perhaps it makes sense at this point to move on to the forward agenda. And so I noticed, Liz, this has got your name against it. Are you introducing this item?
I can do, Chair. Thank you. Hopefully fairly self-explanatory, but let me say a few things. So one, you know, this is here for discussion. If any members want to think about whether there are any gaps, and we've obviously just identified one, we're happy to include that. So one, kind of question about gaps. 2, I think obviously some of these things are also led by others. So as we have presentations today, there might be colleagues and committee members who want to bring things forward for the committee to consider as well. So again, it'd be helpful to capture those. We don't have to set all that in stone now, but it's useful to understand, for example, around your business planning and where you might want to think about the relationship to this agenda. Specifically, if I may, on winter, that's obviously today's meeting, we've got the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, which we will come on to, but we're still awaiting an actual government announcement on that. So the committee is considering it in the hope that we receive the funding. So we might need to come back to that as and when government make any announcements around that funding. Looking forward to spring, just to highlight, as you've already mentioned, the Carbon Impact Toolkit, really important project, and it might be, as you say, that's a helpful place to have a wider conversation around transport as well. I wanted to highlight that when we mentioned the climate and environment plan, when we talk about the strategic outline case, I just wanted to give a bit of background on that. So as you all aware, because you helpfully inputted it and approved it, we published the climate and environment plan last year, and the team are now working on prioritisation of that. And also there's a recognition of the funding needed to be able to deliver it. So we're hoping that there might be further funding through different funding streams from government, or there's other ways that we can try and use some of our own investments. So the team are working on what's called a strategic outline case in order to bring that forward, and that's what we'll bring to the committee in spring, hopefully. And we'll give you an update at that point around what the funding position looks like. Also in spring, we thought about coming back to you on green skills and jobs. This again is another relationship to other work that's going on in other committees. So the Mayor has is setting up a green skills task force. This is meeting for the first time at the end of January, and I know some of you on this call are involved in that, and we thought that's a really important relationship back to this committee. So we wanted to feedback on that, on where we're getting to with that work, and see what your thoughts are. So that's what that alludes to, and obviously the wider pledge around the 1,000 jobs for young people, but it's wider than that as well. There's a large transition to be had in terms of industry and getting people ready for that. And we move on to the kind of summer and and autumn. So just on summer, when we talk about kind of business sustainability, again, there's a real link here to what we're doing around the business committee. We're talking quite a lot to them, as again, some of you are involved in that committee, about the current economic position, but clearly the transition to net zero is going to be an important one for them. I just wanted to mention under that item that we will come back to, that one of the strands of work we're doing around business is innovation. And the Mayor's quite interested in doing a mayoral kind of innovation competition. And given the importance of tackling the climate emergency, we're thinking about whether there's an opportunity to use that competition to spark innovation around this agenda. So it'd be really great to be able to come back to the committee for your thoughts on that. So that's tied into that business piece in the summer. And then just to kind of highlight for the autumn, we mentioned in there about, obviously, around coming back to the climate and environment plan, and the where we're getting to with some of the kind of climate ready pieces. The nature recovery strategy, this is something that we're hearing more from government about expectations around what that needs to look like, and we'll be working with partners. So even though we've got that down for the autumn, it might be something we need to continue to take the committee on as we know more about what's going to be needed for that. So I'll leave it there, Chair. Happy to take questions and thoughts about the agenda. And like I say, happy to take other thoughts from committee members about anything we've missed or anything that you would like to add to the agenda from your own organisation as well.
Okay, thanks very much, Liz. So if I make any comments myself, let's open this up. So got Scott first.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for that sort of highlight of the forward plan. I guess just one bit that I wanted to look at was about the gap around Energy Accelerator funding, because looking at how it's working at the moment, it looks like there might be a potential sort of 2-year gap from when that came in and when delivery starts to happen. It just seems like business funding is likely to be available before the Net Zero Region Accelerator. And I guess sort of with that, assuming both projects had launched after the briefings to this group, they might only start delivering and achieving those reductions like in 23. I just want to steer if sort of that assessment's fair, and if so, like what can we do to speed that up? As I said, there's sort of been a bit of a gap there, and there might be a potential big space there in which we're not able to do stuff in which is clearly a priority area. So I'll just sort of leave that hanging.
Thanks, Scott. Liz, that's sort of quite specific. Do you want to come back on that, or a colleague?
Let's have a look at it, because I think we might, even though we've got it on the agenda for later, that's not to say that the work might not be continuing. But I don't know if there's a question of funding. So sorry, Chair, I'm not sure specifically on the gap of the funding. That might be the problem. So if I may, unless anybody else on the call knows about it, I'm happy to take it away and come back to you, Councillor Patient.
Okay, not seeing any other officers jumping in on that one at this point. So could we do that and perhaps share a note on that one? Okay, Andrew.
So we got transport coming on the agenda, and I think that there may be a danger that we focus on cars and buses and stuff like that. And I do think that one of the important things is that we have active travel on the agenda and support for that. So I just wanted to flag that up as an issue. The other thing is skills, and I've got a sneaking suspicion it could be very, very easy to turn around and go, yeah, we've got X number of green jobs and we've done X number of green skills. But though the sort of jobs and the sort of skills that we have is going to be pretty much dictated by the approach that we take to how we get the path that we take to achieve reducing emissions. And so what I mean by that basically is if we take the energy sprung approach to retrofitting houses, that's one way of doing it. If we take the wet trades approach to retrofitting houses, that's another approach, and it needs different skills to do those to do each of those approaches. So I think it'd be really quite useful for us to have a clear idea of the sort of skills that we're going to need to achieve what we're trying to do. I could talk a bit more about that, but I think I'll leave it at that for the time being.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. I mean, that's helpful. Obviously, skills is one of the things on the work plan for the next meeting. So hopefully there'll be an opportunity to explore that a bit more there. I'm sure it'll be useful for officers to take that into account as they think about preparing for that. And I agree. It's not just about ticking a box in terms of numbers of jobs. It is about shaping things for the long term. Jack.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just looking at the last meeting of the year in terms of nature recovery, I do think sometimes the biodiversity crisis and nature recovery is somewhat a poor relation to the climate crisis. And I understand we can only fight so many battles and have so many resources at once, but I do feel it would probably be helpful to have a discussion earlier in the year, perhaps at the spring or summer meeting about nature recovery, see if there's any quick wins that we can be doing to support nature. I think if we do leave it until the last meeting of the year and are waiting for the further announcements from government, we do risk not taking any meaningful action on that particular aspect of the plan. So I would like to see us try and bring something forward on nature recovery before the last meeting of the year. I know in Wakefield we've been looking at Project Verdant, a plan in terms of nature recovery and bringing together different partner organisations and the third sector, but I'm sure other colleagues have good ideas too around that. So if we could perhaps bring that up the agenda a bit more and maybe have that discussion in spring or summer, I think that would be welcome.
Thanks. I mean, just to note, we've obviously got a presentation on that further on this agenda as well, so perhaps we could pick that up under that as well. I guess in general terms, I know lots of people are busy people, but we don't have to do everything through the full formal meetings, and it might be there's a couple of things where at some, there's scope for a smaller group to get together semi-informally and look into something a bit more and bring something back, but that might be a topic we want to think about doing that in terms of how we handle the work as well. Okay, Ben.
Thanks, Chair. So I'm just interested to understand a bit more about where within the WICA committee structure, creation of a regenerative and resilient food system for the region is sitting. So, I mean, people will know that, we import the bulk of our food into the UK, and climate change poses the risk of multi-breadbasket failure. We are sitting on, a ticking time bomb, really. And I know in the climate and environment plan that there's a bit in the nature recovery section, but I don't think that's going to be enough to make up the difference of what we import if we start to get global food security issues poking up. So I think that's something that we should be thinking about. It's also a fantastic topic that links lots of things around, climate change mitigation and adaptation, well-being, health, community, all of these kind of topics. So, as a case study topic area, I think I'd really be promoting it.
Thank you. Leah?
Hi. I just want to pick up on what Andrew was saying about skills, and it's not just about creating new jobs, but also making sure that the officers within all the local authorities and within the combined authorities have the right skills to be able to deliver these things as well. So it's a sort of a whole piece on our young people and the people that are already in work and as well. So and if that was being addressed at all. And then more widely, it's sort of understanding the relationship of this committee with each of the local authorities. Is there any accountability between local authorities, say, for example, strategic sustainable transport strategies for each local authority feeding into, say, this committee? I mean, that's transport again, isn't it? So sorry, by accident. But are there things that systemic things that this committee can help with that will unblock some of the things that are blocking changes that would help us get to net zero? That's really a sort of open question, but yeah, maybe that's something we could think about. I don't know.
Okay, thanks. I'll see if somebody's up for taking that one on when we've been through the other comments to give people time to think about it. It's a really good point. Councillor Waller, Andrew.
Hello. As a bit of overlap outside of the West Yorkshire area, I was just keen that flooding and flood prevention and natural flood management wasn't the other side of the silo. That I know that in the programme you're looking at flood defence work, but actually the mechanism does include the potential for creating green jobs upstream and a whole host of skills there. So it's making sure that that was dealt with within the green skills agenda as well as an entity in itself, which was applicable across the whole region. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, and I mean, again, I think you're right, Andrew. The whole kind of flooding, flood prevention, natural flood management. There's a whole area of skill shortages there. You know, from fairly traditional kind of engineering roles to much more challenging and innovative ones, all of which there's a potential skill shortage in, isn't there? So, Liz, come to you first to pick those up, and perhaps I'll ask whether either Ben or Alan want to respond to Leah's point about the relationship between Wicker and the councils, and then I'll tell them if they've got it right. Okay. Liz, come to you first.
Thank you, Chair. Well, thank you everybody for your helpful steers. I think they're all really clear. So I think I don't want to kind of just repeat everything that everybody said, but there's some things we want to move around the agenda. So I think there's certain things that we might want an earlier conversation on, particularly nature recovery was something that kind of came up particularly. But take your point, Councillor Swift, that we might be able to do some of this in some offline kind of working groups in order to get some of the discussion going outside of the formal meetings. And again, that seems like one of the topic areas that there'll be support to do that on. Skills, there's quite a few points about skills, so that's really helpful. And whilst the specific pledges that the Mayor has feel specific, actually there is, everyone's rightly said, there is a wider agenda here about transitioning people already in work for them to be able to take the opportunities and the need really to be able to fill the different jobs that are coming up, and also for it to be quite wide ranging. So we are taking the government definition of what a green skilled job is, and I know there's probably various different views about that because we've got some of our own, but I think that's a helpful way of starting to get into that, to make sure that we're not being too narrow in our definitions. I think the government is quite broad, but hopefully we can come back to that in the spring. So I think I'm looking, that sounds like a really good topic for spring, actually, is all around the skills. Food, yeah, really, we can keep adding things to the list, can't we? I think food is in the as you rightly say, Ben, is in the carbon plan. I don't think any of the other committees are particularly picking up food. We do have a relationship though with some of our North Yorkshire colleagues, where this is quite an interesting topic. I don't think it's on. We do have a partnership committee with North Yorkshire. I think rural issues is on there, but I'm not sure if food is related to that. But it's something that if you wanted to add to this committee, I think we should. The extent to which we can influence is maybe something that we can pick up at the time we talk about it. But as you rightly say, I think it's an important one. And I think they were the main top. I mean, I've kind of kept a list, and as has Janet, so we'll amend the forward plan, and if I may, we can include the revised version of that either in the next committee papers or in the minutes, so that colleagues can see what's coming up. But thank you everybody for your inputs.
Thanks, Liz. I'll come to Ben and then Neil. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. I won't repeat what Liz has said, but I agree with her comments. I think what this committee is doing really well is just highlighting the fact that it's the cross-cutting topics that potentially cut across the roles and the influence of more than one committee that are the things that are coming to the surface as the committee cycle gets up to speed, really. So it's a very live issue, and we do need to think about how we deal with those cross-cutting issues and make sure nothing falls into the gaps. One of the things that we're thinking about and doing on some other committees is to bring a kind of report back about what's happening on other committees to each one, and that might be something that we do here as well. I think in terms of Lee's questions, in terms of how things fit together between the combined authority and local authorities, generally there's no kind of statutory requirement for the plans all to fit together. What we work as officers to do is to ensure that they do fit, because we're developing these things in conjunction with each other. and in partnership, so that we broadly know what's going on. I actually think where on carbon, that's going to be one of the most challenging, because they should fit together, and we need to think about how to make that work. But what we don't have is there is no inference that we have a top-down model whereby the combined authority sets targets and then they are imposed on local authorities. That's not the way that this works. It's much more of a partnership model. You made a point about do officers have the right skills, Lee, as well, and I think on that I would say that across this whole sector there is a scarcity of skills, including in transport, including in environment, engineering, and a whole bunch of areas. And we are taking forward a number of pieces of work to look at how, again, in partnership with other organisations, we try and collectively build a West Yorkshire supply of skills and expertise that we need, and that we also offer a kind of meaningful career pathway for people, so that they recognise they can develop those skills and then have a career in the north, in West Yorkshire, and we can keep them within the family, as it were.
Thanks, Ben. I think that kind of issue about shared ownership. I mean, I guess what we're really looking for in terms of delivering on climate change is that sort of model of distributed and shared leadership, which I'm familiar with. We're talking about in terms of the kind of health and the ICS partnership. We all need to have a shared ownership, that we have targets to get to. To get to zero emissions, and recognise, and find the right mechanisms of mutual accountability. It's not about WICA holding local authorities to account. It's about each of us recognising our responsibilities and being accountable for delivering on our part of them, and understanding the way that our actions also need to mesh with and coordinate with those of our neighbours and of WICA, and indeed of national bodies as well, which is dead easy to say and very challenging to actually deliver on in practice. And I'll come back on a couple of points about that in a moment. Neil, can I come to you next?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Very much agree with what colleagues have said so far. Just very briefly, food was referenced, and there's mentioned linkages with colleagues in North Yorkshire. Just to say that my Climate Emergency Committee, as we've got a number of subgroups that are working very well and been doing for 2.5 years now, we have a food and biodiversity working group. So outside this meeting, very, very happy to pick up that discussion with colleagues regarding that. And we're particularly focusing on vertical farming and how to improve the circular nature of the food economy in Leeds and producing a local food economy. So happy to pick those discussions up in a different venue, Chair.
Thanks, Neil. And again, I noticed a number of people clearly interested on working on that. So Liz has summarised, I think, the main implications in terms of the work plan, but particularly we don't want to lose sight of the importance of looking at transport early on in this, probably ideally at the spring one alongside the report there. The only other point that occurs to me, which should have picked up and perhaps raised with officers beforehand, a lot of these items are kind of reports on where we are, and I guess somewhere there's the question of what the role of this committee is in terms of kind of accountability and measuring progress against outcomes. And whether perhaps particularly, possibly it would sensibly fit with the autumn report, we should be looking then at some sort of report at that meeting on what the actual progress is against the various carbon reduction pathways, and whether we're on track or not. Would that sort of make sense? Getting some nods.
Yes, that's good. I think we're intending. And I can see Alan nodding as well, for reporting for the things that are relevant to the committee and wider as needed, to become a more standard agenda item. So where we have data, I appreciate that not all data sets are updated that frequently around some of this, but where they are, I think it's relevant that the committee should be able to see that. But Alan, I also see you look like you might want to come in on
Sorry, I clicked camera off instead of microphone on, which was slightly unfortunate. But exactly what Liz has said. The intention is for us to bring papers on the evidence relevant to every committee to each of the committees, not just with respect to climate, but to all of the other committees as well. So absolutely. And we can clearly with something like this where, as Liz says, the data doesn't change all the time, or certainly in the way that it's not published in a way that makes sense to report everything at every committee meeting. I think if we plan to have a stock take meeting on the overall position in the autumn, that would make sense, and about progress towards the pathway, the overall position in West Yorkshire, that would be really good. But what we're also trying to do is bring a more of a kind of focus on evidence to each of the committees as well. So, and that would be a look at where indicators that are relevant kind of have moved, or where new information has been published, we would report that, and also where there are maybe reports that are relevant that have come out or been published by think tanks or commissions or research bodies, universities, etc., that the committee would have, that would be brought into a kind of composite paper for the committee as well, and that would be and gives the committee an opportunity to discuss those and for that to shape the conversation. So so a kind of overall stock take in the autumn, but with the intention that there would also be other evidence papers peppered through the year.
Alan, that sounds good to me. Okay, so I think we've got an agreed way forward on that, and also just to say we'll explore outside the meeting the ways in which we can sensibly set up either a working group or an informal conversation around the perhaps initially the nature recovery work as a model for how we might do things outside the meeting as well. And I think we picked up who was interested in that one or two here, but perhaps if people would just want to pop in an email saying they'd be interested in taking part of that work, that would be really helpful. Okay, thank you very much. So if I could take us on then to item 5, which is the capital spending and project approvals. And can I just check who's introducing this?
Hi, Chair. It's Craig Taylor.
Hi, Craig.
I'll take this one forward. I'll just explain the purpose for the report first, because it's the first time you've have had the capital approvals paper, and hopefully you'll have a few more going forward. And then I'll ask Sarah, who's actually looking after the scheme itself, to explain this scheme. So really, this is around our assurance framework and our assurance process, and why we bring projects through the assurance process. So it's really, the assurance framework's been set up, and we review it every year to make sure that we've got the necessary systems and processes in place to manage the funding effectively that we get through from government and elsewhere. And it's so we can make sure that the projects that we do give the greatest benefit to the West Yorkshire and the region. And it also meets our priorities set out in the Strategic Economic Plan, the West Yorkshire Investment Strategy, and also the Mayor's pledges as well. Doing it this way as well also makes sure that everything we do is transparent, and it's all the decisions are made in a proper and transparent way, and probably as importantly that we deliver value for money. And I suppose the reason we have it is that because the government have now devolved a lot of money down to us, and we do a lot of local assurance, we need to have the assurance framework in place to give them confidence that we are going to manage the funding effectively, and we're going to make the right decisions for the West Yorkshire region. With regards to the actual report itself, the top half of it is pretty standard that we'll send through every month. And just to explain that, section 4 outlines how the assurance framework works, and that's essentially 7 activities and 7 decision points, and the schemes go through our assurance framework at each of those activities to make sure that we're getting the best projects. However, I will stress very much that it is a very flexible assurance framework, and we often have projects that may go through only 1, 2 or 3 of those activities, or 2 or 3 of those decision points. It depends on how complex, how large they are, what the value is, and so forth. That depends that. And the key to that is that all of our projects have got to go to the combined authority meeting at least once in their lifetime, and that's nearly always decision point 2, which is the strategic outline case. And it's at the point when they go to combined authority, we then determine what the pathway, the further pathway is, and what the further approval routes are. So that's the point where we would decide whether or not a project comes through to the to this committee, or it goes through to place committee, or it goes through to the business committee. And on that point, just so that everybody's aware that the majority of our projects go through the place committee at the moment. We don't take anything through transport committee at the moment because they're still reviewing their terms of reference at the moment. So if people are interested in seeing what projects go through the combined authority, please look at the place committee minutes and also the combined authority minutes, because we do report up to the combined authority all the decisions that the other committees have made. The other decision maker is our managing director, but that is always further down the line, and that's usually at final business case once we've gone through the strategic outline case and the outline business case. And then just in a little bit on the detail, and then I'll go on to ask Sarah to present the scheme, is that at the top in section 4, we do a quick summary of the project, just so people get a good idea of what the project's around. Then in the section 5 below, that's when we go into the detail of the scheme, the real detail of the scheme for people to read. And that includes, particularly for this committee, the tackling climate implications, the inclusive growth implications, and the equality and diversity implications, as well as the background to the scheme, what the cost of the scheme is, the timescales and the risks of the schemes, and so forth. So if anybody's got any questions, has anyone got any questions on that process? And if not, I'll just hand over to Sarah to go through the project that we've got in front of us today.
I'm not seeing anyone on that.
Yeah. Okay, over to you then, Sarah, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. I'll just summarise very briefly the scheme, but there is more details in the pack that was sent out with the agenda. So carbon emissions from buildings account for 41% of West Yorkshire total emissions, second only to transport, already talked about today. Domestic buildings contribute 26%. The West Yorkshire Pathway Study indicated a need to retrofit 700,000 homes to meet net zero by 2038. Coupled with that is fuel poverty. It affects 17% of homes in West Yorkshire, which is well above the national average of 13%. The Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund, and that is a mouthful, so we've shortened it to SHDF, is an opportunity to reduce carbon emissions and alleviate fuel poverty. The government's fund is worth 3.8 billion over 10 years and is targeted to improve the energy performance of socially rented housing. There are 4 waves of funding, and this paper refers to wave 1. The Combined Authority anticipates an award of 5.06 million, which together with match funding from the social housing providers, provides a total project investment of 10.38 million. The benefits of this project are, in summary, energy improvements to 1,316 houses in West Yorkshire, potential bill reduction of 317k per annum, and that was calculated at autumn 21 prices. Potential CO2 savings of 451 tonnes per annum, and support for 185 jobs and 5 apprenticeship placements. The primary aim is to increase the EPC grade of these homes to band C, and the measures include various forms of insulation, new doors, new windows, and renewable energies such as solar PV and air source heat pumps. The measures will be implemented via a consortium of 9 social housing providers and the Combined Authority. BEIS were due to confirm the funding in December 21, but we are still waiting a formal announcement. However, the deadline to complete the works is likely to remain at January 23, providing a very short timeframe for delivery. Therefore, we seek approval in advance of the government award, noting that confirmation of final funding would be a condition. There are 2 key risks. Funding is not awarded or is less than anticipated. The bid team have received positive feedback to their submission. However, works would not commence until funding had been confirmed, and the Combined Authority would enter into a memorandum of understanding with BEIS. The second risk is regarding supply chain capacity and material prices. These are a concern, and procurement by the providers has already commenced in anticipation of a funding announcement. To summarise, there are quite a few recommendations that seek your approval today. Firstly, to approve the approval to proceed to activity 5, which is delivery, but subject to SHDF funding being secured. Approval to the combined authorities contribution of up to 5.062 million, and within that 600,000 will be made available for development costs. Approval that this combined authority would enter into a funding agreement with the 9 registered providers, and approval that delegated authority would be granted to the head of economic implementation to accept receipt of the funding and to have approval to reallocate funding within the registered providers if the need arises. We also seek delegated authority to be granted to the heads of economic implementation and legal to finalise the funding agreements, and to the Section 73 officer to sign the memorandum of understanding with central government. So that is a summary of the scheme. Are there any questions?
Thanks very much, Sarah. So a number of members want to question or comment, starting with Councillor Cooper. Andrew?
So I see that the way we're actually measuring the effectiveness of the investment is how we raise the energy performance certificate level, the EPC. Now, I think a number of people who've looked at EPCs will tell you that it's not a good measure of ascertaining the energy efficiency of a property, and whether it's actually the measure that we should be using to see whether we've got an effective use of our fundings. I think a big question. And so, do you want to? I noticed you had an intake of breath there. Do you want to say something?
Sorry about that, Councillor Cooper. Yes, I may need my colleague James Brass from Policy to support me on this, but I believe the EPC grade C is set by government. That's sort of one of the sort of criteria set by government. But I understand what you're saying. But I don't know if James can add any more to that.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, and thank you, Councillor Cooper. It was in the competition guidance that we raised the EPC levels up to a C. Most of them are sort of the worst performing. So EPCEs and for example, but the providers have come forward with the schemes themselves. So they think these are the right measures, and they are fabric first measures, which means that they're doing the insulation. So prevent sort of reducing the heating costs in future years.
I get that, and I think the government have given the criteria what the government give, but equally I think that it would be good of us to have a West Yorkshire approach where we recognise what the government has said, but we try and improve upon it. And actually look at things like the carbon emissions associated with it, the heat demand that there is in the property. Actually look at some things which would be, I think, a better measure of the effectiveness in terms of the use of funding. The other concern I have with this is it looks a wee bit of an incremental approach to dealing with the energy efficiency of buildings. We're going to put some external insulation on. We're going to do some underfloor heating. We're going to put some PV on, and it doesn't appear to me to be a sort of whole house approach necessarily, which is going to in one hit deal with the problem, or is it actually going to produce the pipeline of work that we're going to need to do do thousands of properties? Is it working on that? So I look at things like the Nottingham model, the Energiesprong approach that's being used, where they're prefabricated units and heating elements and a warmth charge, and I think a very strong model. You might end up doing fewer properties, but you would you would probably end up having a model which could then be utilised going forward to do many more properties. So it's the sustainability of this that I question really as an approach for retrofitting thousands of houses. Is it just grabbing a load of funding because it's there to do properties, rather than trying to establish a model which will give us a sustained approach to dealing with retrofit going forward?
Thanks. Sarah, you want to?
Yeah, just again, James put the bid in, so James needs to correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe within the first wave we are testing whole of property refits, so looking at everything, very much working under the quality criteria of PAS 2035. So there will be some properties that will receive the whole benefit, and we'll be using that learning to see how we can scale it up.
Yeah, if I can come in again, I think you're right there, Councillor. It does. There was a demonstrator fund a year earlier, and that Leeds Council, Leeds Homes were successful in, and that was taking a whole house approach. So I do agree that it is rather more incremental. But as Sarah points out, some of the providers are looking at sort of more of a whole house approach, and sort of putting in the heat pump. So some of them are looking to go further than what BASE are asking for, and we can certainly learn from that and the work that Leeds are doing. I think it's the Holt Park estate in North Leeds where they're doing a demonstrator, but obviously the funding was capped, and as Sarah says, the providers have come forward with almost sort of matched the grant requirement, and whereas they were only required to put a third in, so they are really committing to this. And I think obviously it's a first wave, and we can look at what schemes are successful and learn between the partners, actually the West Yorkshire Housing Partnership, on how to do it better and sort of move it forward.
Thanks, James. Ben.
I think, Chair, my question might be slightly more relevant to the assurance item on the agenda. So rather than hopping back and changing the subject, I don't know if you want to take the other questions and then come back to me or not.
Okay, happy to do that if that's okay. Sarah, next.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question's around, you mentioned that the government funding was still awaiting confirmation. And I just wonder what conversations were taking part with partners, because they're putting significant amounts of funding into these projects as well. And any impacts that if the funding was lower than we anticipated. And is there or would there be discussions of purchasing power, of economy of scale, if we didn't get the level of funding that we're expecting?
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, we have had a conversation with BASE, and we are awaiting a further announcement from them this week. And we have had positive feedback on our bids, so we are still very hopeful. And this is very important to us, and we are working at risk at this moment in time to establish the programme with the providers. So we have had conversations with the providers. They are aware of the situation, but we are trying to support them in the procurement process to try and sort of get ourselves ready. We haven't got details on all the procurement yet. Different providers are doing different things, but there is quite a lot of work with Efficiency North, which have a framework for this, in terms of trying to achieve economies of scale. But we won't be able to get all 9 providers to procure everything all with the same people, because there's quite different skills involved there. But certainly we are talking at this moment in time.
My turn to hit the wrong button. Thank you. Scott.
Thank you. I mean, I guess it's very, very timely at the moment, but I do sort of wonder if the estimates for the savings on the fuel bills are likely to be underestimates, given where we are really. And I guess the reality of that is it's probably unfortunately going to be fewer people removed from fuel poverty, and that's a reality, you know, and that's where we are now, and God knows what that picture is going to look like in April. So I'm just flagging that. I think it's a really important point sort of in the whole framing of things, and how we discuss this as soon as it becomes a more wider sort of discussion beyond this panel. I think sort of in addition to that as well, and I'm sure you're on with this, but I'm just going to ask the question anyway, is in terms of whether the sort of staff are adequately trained in understanding carbon interventions. So just the people that you've got within sort of housing at Wicker, how many of those project managers have environmental or carbon training, or sort of the qualifications to go along with them? Because I think, and I'll try not to be parochial here, but I think we've sort of seen issues where perhaps there's been a bit of a lack of understanding about some of the work that we're trying to do, and I think that's probably translated when it comes to business case and, you know, cutting money and stuff like that. And clearly us in Calderdale, and I'm sure we're not the only one as well, the other element of it is about the fact that we've got a lot of stone built properties, and actually some of these works are really difficult when it comes to those. They're very, very leaky. Often they're built around a hearth, you know, so some of these interventions are going to be quite difficult to sort of translate in that sort of world, if you know what I mean. And I'll leave it there. I do have some other stuff. Sorry, I realise I've thrown a bit at you there.
Sorry, just to respond, Councillor's Patient. Yes, you're right. I mean, firstly, on the fuel savings, I mean, I made the point that they were priced at autumn 21 prices, so we know, sure. we know it's only going in one direction. I think in terms of training, I think again it's a valid point. Training, you know, it's already been discussed at this committee already about training, and it will be discussed at our programme board in a couple of weeks' time, in terms of the providers having enough people to actually talk to the tenants and explain what's going to happen, as well as having the technical expertise to do the refits. Certainly, you know, refitting a whole stone house is going to be a challenge, and so we do have some concerns on supply chain. But the majority of the work is on fairly simple insulation. And what we hope is these smaller whole of house carbon retrofits will give us that learning to scale up. So I think we're on a big learning curve. Agree with you.
Can I just add two more bits? Sorry, just while I've unmuted myself. I was just going to sort of add, as well as, and this is a bit of like horizon scanning, what other sort of types of tenure are you planning to target in the future? You know, private rented homeowners. I think, you know, and it's great that we're doing social housing at the moment, and that is the right thing to do. But how do we, again, and again, this plays hand in hand in, you know, cost of living crisis, and actually being a homeowner and having a private rented tenure doesn't necessarily mean you're any better well off or secure than someone in social housing. I'm sure it does. There's lots of key factors there. But, you know, how do we sort of manage that? And I guess the other bit is just sort of like to build on the sort of parochial aspects of things. Is I know some of our housing colleagues have described schemes where the BRC has been difficult to meet, where sort of low carbon measures have been reduced in order to lower scheme costs. And that's sort of part of ensuring that the Wicker Grant can support schemes to deliver those new housing units. So there are a few like little tensions there. Just wondered if you have any sort of thoughts on that. One's just about an eye on the future, and the other's just about a few difficulties I know our authority and others have probably had.
Yes, and I might ask James to come in on the eye in the future, because in terms of my work in delivery, the funding is very much focused on either local authority properties. There are different funding grants available on local authority properties, but it is focused all on social housing at this moment in time. And if anyone's very good at maths, they'll realise that, you know, 1,300 houses, and we've got 700,000 to retrofit. You know, I'm not aware of any other funding apart from SHDF at this moment in time. So we're working with a very small budget on a very big challenge. I don't know if James has got anything else to perhaps be a bit more positive on the future of where we can take this.
I mean, on the private sector homes, the local authorities have been bidding in for similar funding called the Local Authority Delivery, which was the Green Homes Grant. So we've been reasonably successful in, council partners have, in accessing those funds. And so they'd be available for private owner-occupiers, private renters, although the subject of trying to upgrade privately rented homes we might need to come back to, but I know it's quite challenging. However, I think in terms of the future, the scale of the challenge in retrofitting homes is massive. And we brought the Scaling Up Better Homes Yorkshire report to the previous committee, Green Economy panel, and I think it really, as well as looking at the government funds, we need to be looking at private capital and sort of leveraging that. So it's quite a big challenge, I think, and it's the work that we're hoping to do through the Mayor's Plan, through the Better Homes Hub, and sort of match supply and demand really, and unlock private capital and bring that into play. Otherwise, I think we'll be struggling to meet the scale of the challenge.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably easier to give a more political answer to that and say, we are in this position that there is no significant funding scheme to support individual homeowners in the costs. And I think over the last decade, we've kind of tested to destruction the theory that you can persuade people to borrow to invest in insulation against making their homes more energy efficient for the future. There are all sorts of reasons why that model doesn't work, and particularly touched on the point Scott said earlier about the hard to treat properties, which are so common within Yorkshire and West Yorkshire in particular. So we do face a huge challenge in this area, and I guess one of the hopes is that a pilot scheme like this does two things. One is that it builds supply chains, both in terms of people with the skills to do the work and in terms of businesses within there, and expertise and evidence on what works. But we need to be working on how we create the funding streams that hopefully will then lead to a pipeline of further demand to build on that. Neil, I'll come to you and then come back to Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Funnily enough, I was about to make a couple of really similar points in the fact that the work we're doing here is building the sector for the future, isn't it? Whether it's whatever tenure type it is, the work we're doing here on various housing types that we're doing across the county will be an excellent cost evidence base for both demonstrating to the private sector that it can be done, demonstrating to private capital that it can be done, but also lobbying hard on government to say that we've got this experience in Leeds and Calder, Kirklees, etc., across the county. We're all working together on. I mean, in Leeds, colleagues already mentioned Holt Park. I mean, it's not only that. I mean, we've done a pretty good cross section now of our public housing stock, and what we've learned over the past 4 years is night and day, really. So we've got a huge swathe of experience. But it's funnily enough, I must admit, I came to early today. I had a regular working sessions with officers about our local plan review that's climate emergency led. And this meeting that we're having now certainly reinforces it's not what we build in the future that I'm worried about. I think we're on the right path for that. It's what exists in the present that keeps me up at night, because the scale of 700,000 homes across the county is quite daunting by any stretch of the imagination, isn't it? And to make a political point, and I think it needs to be made, is we've not seen in Leeds certainly any sign from government or from members of parliament, of the governing party, shall we say, that there's any recognition of the scale and the urgency of the problem and the mobilisation of resources and the innovative thinking that's going to be required. We certainly do need to tap private capital in some form. We need those innovative capital instruments that enable local authorities to invest directly, but also to help people. But it has to be said that HM Treasury is still the cheapest source of borrowing in the country, and they do have the Bank of England. And if we can't mobilise ourselves to decarbonise, then we're in real trouble. So I think we're in a good position, colleagues, that as West Yorkshire, to make that, especially now we have a mayor, to make that real strong lobbying case to government. This is what we can do, and this is how we can do it. But it is a very daunting prospect. And just think of any particularly thinking councillors on this call. Think of a part of your ward, take aside a quarter of your ward, and then think about in that area just how many different types of tenure there are, then how many different types of income there are, then how many different types of social attitudes there are to addressing this problem. And then you have to think about convincing everyone to work along these lines. That none of us have an answer yet to. And I think that's our really big task. Really big task. It's as daunting. I said in the council chamber, this is as daunting, and it should be as daunting to people as, September 1939. And that's the scale of thinking we need to get into the groove of. And anyway, colleagues, you discovered my soapbox, so I think I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, but no, completely understand where you're coming from. Right. Should I still come to Leah first and then come to you, Ben? Is that okay? Yeah, Leah. Yeah.
I don't know if I can follow Neil there. I've got two quite one little question and one comment. The question is that it's predicted to make savings of 451 tons of carbon. How does that contribute to our targets for the climate emissions reduction? Tiny, Andrew's doing tiny fingers. So this is really about a pilot scheme that kind of helps us get on the right path, get on the right track. I suppose it's just about prioritizing funding where funding should go to have the most impact. That's sort of the point I'm trying to get at. My second comment is about, I see that this might be the next bit actually. It's about sort of social value of the people that are doing this work as well, and making sure that's demonstrated. The providers the providers demonstrate social value, so that it's built into all of the supply chain, sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental, and the other one, economic as well.
Thanks.
Yes.
Sarah, do you want to pick those up?
Yes, sorry, Leah. Yes, the tiny impact on carbon emissions. I can't say any more on that, I'm afraid. It is small, but it's a start. What I would say is we talked about speed, and one of the advantages of us trying to move on this very quickly is that we can, one, demonstrate to central government that we can deliver, and two, we can use that learning to formulate the submissions we put in for waves 2, 3, and 4. So I think, we've got to use this, move with it as quickly as possible, and use that learning to upweight our submissions. And I think secondly, on social value, definitely. Within delivery, that's what we do. We have to check and work with our contractors to make sure that we are getting the additional social value from the investment that we're making. So each provider, we will work with them on their procurement process and on the people that they're going to use, and that will form part of their submission to our PAT process. So they will be evaluated on their social value of their procurement. If they work with someone like Efficiency North Framework, there is a social value plan or automatically built in, where social value credits are generated and used for local community projects. So it's definitely an important part of the procurement.
Thank you, Sarah. Okay, Ben.
Yes, thanks, Chair. So I'm changing the subject slightly. I guess it's a process-based question, really. I'm interested to understand how climate risk is factored in here alongside decarbonisation for the capital programmes. It may or may not be relevant to the most recent conversation around this particular funding, whether it's part of that pot or not in terms of its considerations. But the Green Book sets expectations around accounting for climate change in both 2 and 4 degree temperature increase scenarios and the likely climate impacts that those will have. And there's clearly a big piece of thinking that needs to happen around what are the co-benefit opportunities between changes that help both carbon reduction and climate change resilience, and where the trade-offs are. So, I mean, there's a lot in the literature around that, but it's something that I don't see in that assurance framework, and I'm just wondering who's thinking about that.
Sorry, can I answer that one? Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, I'm the head of portfolio management and appraisal, so it's my team that my team's got all the appraisal offices in it, and we appraise each of the business cases that are coming through. So we obviously did this one as well. So we do look at the carbon impact tool that was on the forward agenda earlier. It's certainly going to help us. It's not quite ready at the moment, but that'll certainly help us, and that'll be part of the recommendations that we make to to all the committees when projects come through the assurance process. So it's very much within the templates that we have for each of the business cases, where they have to answer all of the questions with regards carbon reduction, and they have to do a calculation, and they will have to do that based on the carbon impact tool that will come out hopefully in the next month or two. We as officers don't make decisions based on the carbon impact of a scheme. We just put that information into the reports, so decision makers are very aware of what that impact is, and then they take that. They make the decision balanced on all of the other factors through the other 5 cases within the business case as well.
So
it's okay.
Maybe I didn't explain myself very clearly, but I'm not talking about decarbonisation. I'm talking about climate change adaptation and resilience, and the associated costs of factoring that into any capital projects.
I'm not sure I can answer that question. Can anybody else answer that question better?
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure what you mean, to be honest. If you could explain it a little bit better.
I'll send a link through to the Green Book supplementary guidance, but there's an expectation from government around how projects should be factoring in the expected climate change disruptions and changes that will come in both 2 and 4 degree global warming scenarios, and costing in changes to the business case options to make sure that the proposals are resilient to those impacts.
Right, okay.
Thank
you.
So can I suggest that, because I think that's wider, as you said, Ben, that's about the broader assurance framework, isn't it? So perhaps that's something that officer colleagues can pick up and look at outside the meeting and respond to. And if you feel it's something we need to bring back here, then we'll do that. I don't know if Alan or Ben want to add anything on that.
Yeah, well, yes, sorry. Yeah, briefly, sorry, I wasn't quick enough, but I was just checking some emerging work, and there is reference in the toolkit to climate change adaptation. So without knowing exactly what the detail is and precisely whether it answers the question, but we'll go away and take a look at it. And obviously, when the toolkit comes back, the committee will have a chance to review that aspect of it. But thanks for raising it, and we'll, like I said, I'll have a look at the detail, and perhaps it's a conversation to have outside the meeting. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Ben, do you want to add anything to that?
Well, just, I mean, I think Ben raises a really interesting point, and it may be given the interest that this committee has in the assurance and appraisal process, it probably is sensible for us to bring a report that just sets out the assumptions and the process that we go through in assessing those schemes, so we can bring a future paper to kind of get into the technical side of this, because I know the Green Book has been changing, so that would seem quite helpful to bring everybody up to the same place and explain the assumptions that we do make, just in case people don't agree with them.
Okay, thank you. So hopefully that's a helpful way forward to that, and I'd say wider than this individual scheme, but good in terms of the climate impact. So thanks for raising that, Ben. Okay, so I'm taking it from that conversation. I'll just ask people to formally confirm that we are happy to go ahead with this scheme and agree the recommendations as set out, or I suppose technically to ask Ben to take action on the recommendations as set out. Unless I see anybody violently shaking their heads, we'll take that as read and agreed and move on. Thank you. So item 6, climate adaptation and resilience, that's the item that falls due to agent's absence. So next item is distributed network operator business plans and programs. And I'm sorry, I've got my wrong, as always happens, I have the wrong piece of paper in front of me. So I think that this is Jim Cardwell from Northern Power Grid.
Hello, Councillor Swift. I can hear you fine.
Hi, Jim. Yeah, okay.
Hello.
Just looking around the screen.
I'm here in the ether. There's only one of me, and there's lots of us. So yeah, hi there, and hello everybody. So I've got some slides to talk through, and I wondered if we could get those on the screen. This is where maybe Alison and I should have reviewed this. Alison, are you in a position to stick them on the screen, or do you want me to press some buttons and have a go?
If you could press some buttons and have a go, that would be great, unless Jeanette's got them. She's not looking. It's not looking likely.
We've opened so that you can present. We've opened your the settings, but we have got them as well.
Very good. Well, let me see if tell me if any of that's working.
That's
Jeanette.
working.
That's good.
God, that's all right, isn't it? Right, I'm going to try not to press anything else for the rest of the time I'm talking. So, I was going to quick time check. Councillor Swift is our chair, illustrious chair. I was going to maybe talk for about 15 minutes, then open up to Q&A. Does that suit you for maybe another 15 minutes, or do you want quicker than that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. We've got you and one other item, and so that's absolutely fine, Jim.
Super. So yeah, great. Well, good afternoon, everybody. So there's my name on the screen, and that's what I do, and I work for Northern Power Grid. And firstly, I guess it's as Councillor Swift said right at the off. Unfortunately, you're going to get a 2-for-1 offer here. You're going to get colleague Mel Taylor from Northern Gas Networks. You're going to get the sort of gas side of the equation, and we'd planned on doing kind of a joint kind of whole energy kind of thought from the networks in this part of the world. But unfortunately, that we had to change our plan. So we'll hear from Mel a bit later. But I guess it's a key point to raise, that I guess what we're trying to do here is trying to view it as a whole system thing wherever we can, really, rather than just push Lecky, if you like. That's not our ambition at all. So, but if I just sort of continue and just, you probably know who we are. I know some of you relatively well, but just in case you don't, I don't want to take that as assumed. So we run the local electricity grid in both Yorkshire and the North East. Another way of looking at it is, I think last time I checked the figures, in West Yorkshire, population of maybe about 2.3 million people. We think we serve about 8 million people in totality. So just to give you some idea of, when I'm talking to you guys, I'm talking to almost 30% of the population that we serve in this part of the world. So it's great to be with you today. Any numbers and figures I bandy around, apologies there for the full map, the full thing you can see there. But right side of the Pennines, all the way South Yorkshire, Northern Lincolnshire, up to just south of Berwick is who we deal with, and very much our statutory duty, if you like, is to make sure we maintain and develop efficiently the electricity network to serve the people of this region. But I think a lot of the comments I'm going to share with you today in a sort of quick run through is very much based on what I think are the sort of areas that we've been talking about so far today, and the ones I know of old that are the ones that interest you the most. So, but in the Q&A, ask me whatever you like. It's fair game. But that was it. So a lot of decarbonisation, I suppose, and some of the sort of, as has been evident in the conversation today, that broadens out. It's a broad church. I think it was Liz when we were earlier saying the list's growing. Yeah. So there's lots of related issues here that we're trying to think of as we think about how to develop the grid going forward. And I think of interest is that we're an interesting cycle in our sort of business cycle, which typically runs in about sort of 5-year cycles of where we come forward with very detailed propositions for what we think we can do for the people that we serve. And Ofgem, as our economic regulator, as we're a regulated monopoly, that there's an absence of competition, and therefore it's right and proper that it scrutinises us and agrees the revenues and the incentives that are placed upon us to serve people's wishes and needs, and for the next sort of 5-year period. So we're kind of at max transparency, because we submitted a business plan to the regulator in December, and it's on our website. And make sure you have a good cup of tea if you want to dive into it, because it gets quite long. But the good news is, I think, is that there's loads of glorious detail in there about exactly, it's like a fully costed plan, to use a sort of political phrase here, in terms of what we think our role is, what we think we can provide, and how we think we can help our customers. And we've gone through a number of, as you can say, some pretty significant consultation exercises, you can see on the slide, over the last 18 months to do that. So it's not just something we've created in a dark room. There have been times when we've been in the dark room, but most of the time we've been out in the light, if you like, trying to make sure we're listening and playing back to people. And we even submitted a draft plan and published that one back in July of last year, so people could comment on that. And that was a very detailed draft plan, so there's loads of opportunity. I know some of you have been involved in some of these things, so you are some of the people and some of the numbers that you see along the bottom there in terms of the many people that we've had views from on this. But essentially, I guess, why am I here today? Well, it's to sort of respond to the invite, because it's great opportunity to sort of share this, get your take on it. I mean, really interested in what you make of this, because we're going through a sort of a process with the Ofgem, our regulator, through the course of this year. As you can see there, it reaches a final decision in December of this year, and then we go live with a new period from April 2023 with a new package and a new set of outputs and commitments that we've got to deliver, new set of prices, etc., that we do there. So it's very well timed to seek to get some feedback from you today, and any follow-up you want to do after this. Just in terms of where we pitched our plan, way to sort of interpret this diagram here is, if you think down the left-hand side, there are all the things that we think we've got a part to play for our customers. So you start there with decarbonisation at the top, and you go all the way down to customer safety, customer service, climate resilience at the bottom there. And across the top, across the top there, is where we're comparing the current thing we do today and saying just how different do we think our service needs to be in the future. So the longer the arrow, the more the difference is. Yeah. So if you go right across the right hand side, there's a new world. So decarbonisation, we really think we are stepping into a very different upscaling of our activity in this, in terms of our ability to connect more low carbon technologies in all their different guises for our customers and make sure the network is there to support them, for example. So the top ones there are really about decarbonisation, making sure that our system is strong and is there when people need it, and also that we're connecting people when they need it and when they need those connections. So they were the ones where we've really said, breaking new ground, new world. It doesn't diminish anything else. You'll see there's nothing where we're saying we're standing still. The idea is, if we want to achieve all that good stuff on the right hand side that I won't read out, it's all there for you, but it's about saying, as you'd expect, if we're setting out a kind of 5-year vision, we better be moving forward in every respect, because that's what you would expect from us, I think, and what our customers have told us anyway. So we're moving forward in everything, but in certain things we really are going a lot further and seeking to do that. And of course, the decarbonisation agenda matches the climate change emergencies and the call for action in terms of that respect. So we've gone large on that, if you like, in our plan in terms of what we can do. And what we've done on that decarbonisation is reflect the fact that there are increasing needs for electricity. There's more and new uses of electricity coming through. I think that's you'll well understand that. The key thing from a network perspective is we want to be making sure that we are supporting whatever decarbonisation pathway, whatever speed of decarbonisation our customers want to go, and not being some kind of anchor drag, if you like, pulling people back and stopping people from expanding, if you like. We don't want to be the network to be the limiting factor on people's ambitions to go with that. So that's the key thing for us. Of course, it's all very well drawing a line in a graph and going, well, that's how many heat pumps we're going to get, that's how many EVs, that's what the electric buses we're going to have, that's what the efficiency standards are going to be in buildings, you name it. And we've done that ourselves as a group here, where we've been looking at those kind of future pathways, decarbonisation pathways. We've done a lot of that. But of course, there's a lot of uncertainty, because as we know, the only thing about a forecast is that it's going to be wrong. It's just how wrong is it going to be? So we've been really careful to set a set of scenarios moving out to the future, but we've tended to pin our sort of delivery plan on a fairly ambitious, fairly high set. So it's one of the Climate Change Committee scenarios, the sort of balanced pathways one, which is quite high up the stack in terms of the speed and the rate of decarbonisation, because I guess our worry is that if we set our base plan for a lower level than that, then we might give ourselves a problem either in the 2020s or even in the 2030s. Because if you think that when we look at those charts and we look at those graphs going out to the future, the only way is up, effectively. As you move into the 2030s, you've got to be on a, we've got to be bringing forward skills have already been mentioned today. We've got to be making sure we've got the people, we've got the supply chains with the equipment we need, etc., etc. So we don't want to be going but there are sort of uncertainty mechanisms and proposals we put in our plan for why we should, how we should move that up and down, if you like, as we go forward. So that's the decarbonisation, and I was just going to just step through quite quickly and come back to them in the Q&A if it's so 3 main areas of our plan. One to do with decarbonisation. It's got a couple of slides on that. So firstly, this is about climate change mitigation and what we can do. This is the sort of bread and butter of what we do as a business to support our communities to decarbonise. So we're looking the first couple there on community energy advisors and local area energy plan advisors is, I guess, is our contribution to the sort of joint planning activity that needs to happen there. With the community energy advisors, it's much more with customers or with, say, community energy groups, that sort of thing, where we're looking to be part of the solution. We're certainly not going to be the only part of the solution, but we're doing our bit, I suppose, and trying to right size that to say we're going to do our bit to get out there in our communities and give information and help people and educate and inform. We've got quite a bit of expertise, and we want to be working with our communities to help upskill and think about what decarbonisation means for them in terms of their homes or their activities, those sort of things, where we can help out there. Local area energy plans is much more actually about linking into things like the Decarbonisation Action Plan that West Yorkshire we've been looking at, see how we can work with local authorities and link our plans in with others and with the gas networks, and think about how we can sort of make sure we've got sort of one plan, place-based strategies for decarbonisation. We've got things like voltage optimization. So this is a really interesting. We've got an innovation project going on in Boston Spa over near Wetherby, where we're really looking to see if we can use, I guess it's getting a bit technical, so I'll keep it pretty light. But if we can reduce the voltage on the network serving people, keeping within the statutory limits, but there's a real opportunity there to actually produce a customer saving on the bill. So I guess when you get into thinking about the credit crunch and the price crunch at the moment we've got with energy, I guess we're trying to do whatever we can do on our network to support the whole bill reduction by doing something fairly small in terms of our cost, but bigger impact there. And of course, this is about working for all our customers. So there's this whole issue of just transition. So we're kind of eager to look at that. Still in the environment, this is about us looking inwards. So if you think of us as quite a big business, we've got 2,500 people, we've got 800 vans. We've got to walk the talk, if you like, and we've got to do our own part of this. But this is just us as a big business doing our thing. So carbon footprint, we're looking to reduce that. So we're looking to, bring 50% of our controllable carbon footprint is actually on our buildings. So a bit like local authorities, like we're looking at our building stock and seeing what we've got targets to reduce that. We've also got our vehicle stock. So we're looking as we replace that to bring in ultra low emission vehicles, that sort of thing. So we've got various things there. I guess the losses on our network is a key thing. You get electrical losses when you push electricity down wires, you get heat losses and things. So we'll be continuing to do things on that. We've got to think about oil leakage, where we've got lots of, we use oil as an insulant in our electrical equipment. So we've got to look at reducing that. We've got innovation there where we've got some self-sealing additives that we've been testing. So that if we spring a leak in a cable that's got oil in it, that should plug the leak. A bit like a sort of for those of you of an age, rad welds, that kind of sort of idea. So we've got there, and also things like biodiversity in our substations. We've got loads of substations, so we're looking to see how we can boost biodiversity in some of our sort of industrial locations. This next one is really about thinking about reliability and the availability of our network. So if you call it one of the areas where we're still challenging ourselves to go to do more, because this is, I guess, even before decarbonisation, this was the number one for our customers, and it's still really high in customer what customers want from us, which is fundamentally it's about fewer and shorter power cuts. So we're setting targets to continually do more there. And then we've got aspects of climate change adaptation here. So as before, it's mitigation, it's trying to stop the planet heating up. This one is about dealing with the effects of. So a bit similar to that question on the how we can take account of that. So with us, I guess it's a lot of this is about storms. It's more extreme weather patterns coming through and affecting the network. So it's cutting back the vegetation. It's about thinking about the design standards of our equipment. We'll be doing a lot in the current period about flood risk, about what we do there. So we're doing that. And also just using things like projects and analytics and things to look at the impact of that climate change and then think about our adaptation as we go. So nothing stands still in that respect. And sort of getting near the end of my little rapid fire around some of the things we're looking at. So thinking about our sort of customer service, we're targeting pretty high standards of customer satisfaction. I mean, we're already in the low 90s in our customer satisfaction surveys that we do. So that's not bad, but just challenging ourselves to go further with that. I think the top left here is interesting. It really comes home to roost with decarbonisation, because in our plans, we're talking about spending roughly an extra £100 million a year on the decarbonisation priority, in terms of putting in a bigger network where it's needed to deal with the increase in that. But then you get a real important case of, well, what's the fair way to charge for that? Who should pay for that? Which customers? And so we've been looking at some of our policies here on when you get down to the local network feeding individual properties and individual houses. We're looking at a policy here where we say, well, we think there's a socialized cost here to have a cable into a house, if you like, such that if you've got a small cable that was installed in the 50s or 60s, and you now want to stick a heat pump in and a electric vehicle charger of a reasonable size, if you like, then that's probably fair and proper that would require an upgrade to your service, and that should be a socialized cost. Now, if you want to go and stick in two electric vehicle chargers and you want to stick in some pretty rapid charging as well, well, you're now starting to say, well, hang on a minute, I think that's something that probably you should pay a bit more for yourself, and we shouldn't spread that cost around all the users of our network, including those in fuel poverty, if you like. So there's those kind of judgments to be made on what's a fair and equitable pricing and how we upgrade network as we go. So that's been quite sort of central to our thinking. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. And finally here, I guess, in the same way that in the community energy advisors, we're looking to say, we think there's a bit of an education information thing. I guess linking to that, we're looking to support 100,000 customers in fuel poverty. That's probably about 25%, we think, of our customers in extreme fuel poverty. And they are old figures, coming back to, I think it was Councillor Patient's point about energy cost rise, so fuel poverty gets more significant. But we're looking to, these are about programs with organisations like Green Doctors that you might be familiar with, who we're looking at how people can help, how we can help with advice to people on energy efficiency, not making the problem any worse, if you like, access to grants, how we can look at income, how we can look at debt, how we can look at sort of advice programs and all sorts of things. So we think that's a quite important thing. It's another example where we think we're part of the solution. We certainly haven't got a magic wand that can cure this, but we can be working with others to try and see what we can use with our knowledge to help with that issue. I'm going to bring it into land now, Councillor Swift, and then open up for questions if that's okay. So just a couple more. You could be forgiven for thinking it's a bit manana, a bit jam tomorrow, because I was talking about the sort of middle of 2020s and a load of commitments we've made and money we're spending to in the electricity bill for our customers. But there's some stuff going on today. So we've got a lot of green recovery investment going on at the moment. This was some extra money that it's kind of national scheme that our regulator ran to say, and we ran a sort of a call for projects and things. So one of the ones that's affecting West Yorkshire, just on the edge of West Yorkshire there, I think that's probably might be the Wetherby Moto Services or somewhere around there potentially. Wetherby's doing quite well out of me today. But this is about saying we were looking for projects where we could bring them forward and do them right now and give real benefit. And these are kind of, to use the wonderful phrase, shovel ready. Okay, they didn't need a load of permissions or anything. There were things that we could do and instantly provide extra capacity on the grid, if you like, that had projects ready to connect to them. So we've got things like some of the work that BEIS are doing at the moment with OZEV, looking at rapid charging on the motorway and strategic road network around the country, and making sure that's like a barrier to uptake of electric vehicles for everyone in West Yorkshire and anywhere else who worried about range and the reliability of the charging network or the availability of it. So that's one of the projects we're doing here, as well as some of the other things that you see listed there now. So I guess, again, another key area of focus for this group and its predecessors, the Green Economy Panel, thinking about low carbon, clean growth, good quality jobs, those sort of things. So we're trying to bring forward some investment to do that. So we're bashing on with those, and those projects are going to be concluded through the course of this year, if you like, to get those finished. So finally, I gave you a health warning right at the beginning. There's loads of, I think it might be about 3,000 pages. I think we've totalized it at. So be careful, big cup of tea required. But that first document is a 200-pager. It's got loads of detail in it. As to what we're proposing here, and a lot of my comments have sort of come from that. So please dig into that. You might be interested in that, and also some email addresses. So that was it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Jim. So a couple of people wanted to comment, starting off with Scott.
have I unmuted? Oh yeah, there we go. Thank you. And assuming that these are going to be shared, these sort of slides, so we can, I love a bit of extra reading over the weekend, so I'll delve into that at some point. So yeah, thanks for the presentation. Sort of really interesting. Just a bit of a challenge really on one of the aspects, and then a little bit a request for a little bit more detail on one of the other things. So, I mean, community energy sort of mentioned in there, and that sounds all, you know, nice and stuff, but I think probably we're all aware that national policy isn't in favour. So that's, I guess, a bit of a, you know, conflict there. I know that, like, if you build a solar farm, you're liable for any grid upgrade needed to enable that as a business cost. And that's the same for heat pumps as well. I know we've got a community energy scheme up in Blackshaw Head, and I know one of the members from there is actually on our climate change committee. There's a bit of a tale about a community wind turbine, which was scuppered back in the day because the grid connection, you know, out in the sticks, if you will, was too expensive for the project business case. So that's just a bit of a thing going forward. And I don't know if you have sort of any thoughts on that. Interested in the local area energy plan advisors. I just wondered sort of how the funding might be managed on that, because again, that's sort of an on-cost thing, isn't it, as opposed to you know, capital work and infrastructure. And then just a bit of a final point, really. Sorry, I hope you can manage to answer these. I realise I'm taking the mickey a little bit today, but in terms of resilience for your network as well, and clearly Storm Arwen, so, you know, the effects of climate collapse and has massively felled lots of trees in and around the area, you know, absolutely tens of thousands in the Lake Districts and beyond. So I'm wondering how you're factoring that into sort of business costs as things go forward, because clearly it affected you. It definitely affected Calderdale. So 3 bits there.
Yeah, no worries. I better start speaking, Scott, before your list gets longer. Yeah, absolutely. So no problem. So I'll take them in the order you've bowled them, if you like. So yeah, clearly, sometimes the cost of connection can stop a scupper, I think was your word, or stop a project proceeding just because it just blows the business case. And I think, you know, I made reference, didn't I, in a different sense when going through, to say it's not just about the cost of these things, but it's who pays. So I was talking there about the domestic connection, and where we've been looking at where we think is a fair representation, and there's a conversation going with the regulator to try and get some standard approach to that one, if you like. But on the it's interesting that Ofgem as a regulator itself has been thinking about that and has been promoting some more socialisation of the costs, so that your wind farm developers might be interested in that, because basically what they were proposing is that there is some more socialisation of that cost, and more of the cost is spread around the other customers and not the connecting party, with the view being that a lot of the connections coming forward are going to give societal benefit in terms of they're bringing, you know, helping to mitigate against further climate change, and that's got to be a good thing for everybody, if you know what I mean. So that's the justification for it. So I guess we think we're okay with that in principle. I guess we have a policy objection to some of the extent of where Ofgem was going with some of its policy changes, because we thought actually it was going to socialise some pretty chunky big costs of some things, and we're thinking they got the balance about wrong, because some of the people picking up that bill are the fuel poor, if you like, once you then smooth it all around all the customers of GB, if you like. So there are some big decisions yet for Ofgem to land on there, but that is a live topic. So that your first is a live topic, and we're engaged in that, and it's interesting to get your perspective, and we'll see where that lands. Of your second one, which was about local area energy planners, I guess it will still go into the bill. So in the same way that the cost of us investing in the network will go into the customer bill. So it might be expensed in a different way, if you like, but it'll still be shown in the bill. So just to be really clear with you, the way that we get funded is that we charge electricity suppliers for each of the customers of them that are in our area. So you then, as a business or a domestic customer, get your bill from the energy supplier, and our cost is subsumed within it. And as a domestic customer, it's about 90 quid. That's what you pay us per year. That comes through to us, but you don't see that because it just goes into your supplier. But but if you're in our area, it's about 90 quid for domestic property that comes through to us. So that's how it works, and that local area energy planners and the funding for that is no different, if you like, to the to buying transformers or overhead lines and the sort of capital expenditure that we do as well, if you like, or even our business support costs and things like that. It's just all in there as our sort of people cost of doing that and doing that. So that's that one. And your third one was about Storm Arwen, which makes me twitch a little bit because yeah, it's been and indeed, I mean, it's been a horrible time for a number of our customers, particularly those in the sort of high ground of, or the high and low ground of Calderdale, where your good self is, or even going up the spine of the Pennines as you go further north into the northeast as well. So it's been a really tough time for our customers, and we've really felt for them. So I think, you know, resilience already featured in our business plan, but it's just brought a massive spotlight onto that area and about, well, what are the kind of standards that we should hold to in the future? So what are those resilience, and, you know, how resilient should our networks be? And indeed, you know, what should those be, and particularly for rural customers and those more prone to the effects of weather, I suppose, because it's less to do with urban customers. Those connected to urban circuits, they're generally less affected. It's generally more our rural customers. Although it's not quite as clear as that, because of course we had the Great Yorkshire floods in 2007, which particularly hit South Yorkshire, and it was a big bit of Sheffield and Meadowhall all around that area that got impacted quite a bit then, as well as bits of West Yorkshire, of course, and the sort of Calder Valley. I don't need to tell you any more about that, but yeah, resilience is massive, and there's a number of inquiries going at the moment through government, Ofgem, a number of councils running inquiries, like Northumberland's running an inquiry on that at the moment. So I think we're going to be watching that and working out if that affects any of our plans and changes any of that, and involving ourselves in that debate.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
I'll just bring Andrew in. I just wondered if you want to stop sharing your screen now so we can see everyone.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I picked the right button to stick it up there, but then I've left it up there. I do apologise.
No problem. Andrew, I'll come to you.
So, Jim, one of the things we know is that the direction of travel is going to move away from gas boilers and towards electric heat pumps, and so demand for your services is going to shoot up over the next couple of decades. So we know that that's a coming. One of the issues that we know is that the amount of renewable energy that we've got sort of planned is not going to actually reach that amount of demand. But who knows? We may well find a way of dealing with it. So the question, I guess, is it in your work, do you factor in demand reduction into what you do? Because if there are ways of reducing the demand for heat, so we don't need as much electric demand for heating, then you don't have to put in the infrastructure to the same degree. So I'm just wondering how you're tied into that, and wondering whether there is some sort of relationship between yourselves and passive house, energy sprung type developers who could take a different approach to dealing with the problem and by through demand reduction.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we do. There's a really short answer. So it's not just about building a bigger network. We're a million miles away from. You might remember the days of what would it have been? Would it be in the 70s when as regional energy companies we used to run? We had some shops flogging fridges and white goods and things. You know, those were the days where we had nuclear power stations being built, and it was part of our job to go and get lecky out there, get people to soak it up. It was almost like use as much of it as you can, please. Yeah, we're all completely different world now. We're not incentivized in any way to use more lecky. Okay, so and also I'd add into your point, the point I made right at the start in terms of that whole energy system. So yes, for both demand reduction, if we can get that down, and we do factor that in, but also actually just moving it into a different period in the day. We'll spend a lot of time talking about that. So thinking about not only we might use less power if we can get a fabric first kind of policy out there, but also we can move demand if people can charge their electric vehicle, maybe not at peak network. Don't charge it right now, please. It's cold and dark out there. The needles are busting on the, when I look at the grid at the moment. We're burning a lot of coal right now. Currently, I looked at the stuff earlier today, well, about an hour ago, it's 5% coal on the GB at the moment that we're burning at the moment. And that's where we're getting our electric from, but also it's peak on the local grid. So we're interested in moving that peak over to the side and using and giving people advantage for doing that. So that's and I think when you come on to then, that's where also an efficiency-led approach can really help us to get that down and reduce that peak, because that's where we can do for our bit of the bill. So it's not up to us where the power comes from. We're a shipper, if you like, and we don't generate the stuff. So, and we don't use it other than in our own offices and things. So basically, as a shipper of that, we're incentivized to try and keep our shipping costs down. And if we can nudge that stuff down or just bring the whole curve down, the pattern of use. So we are interested in working with different models, if you like, and understanding what different consumption patterns are associated with different uses and housing approaches and things like that. Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks very much, Jim, and thank you very much for that presentation. If you'll excuse us from moving on now to our final item, but thank you. And I think you said earlier you'd share the slides, which is great. So final item is nature recovery. I think we've got Rachel, Paul and Liam from Yorkshire Wildlife Trust and Natural England. So I'm not sure which of you is starting off, but I'll hand over to you to kick off.
Hi, yeah, I'll kick off. My name is Paul Duncan from Natural England. I'm the area manager for Yorkshire and Northern Lincolnshire. I'm joined by Rachel Bice, who's the Chief Executive of Yorkshire Wildlife Trust, and also Liam O'Reilly, who's my Senior Advisor on nature recovery. And what we're going to look at today is around local nature recovery strategies, particularly for West Yorkshire. We're going to just run through background and context, look at the pilots that have already been run, the 5 pilots and lessons learned from that. But probably most importantly, look at the opportunities that LNRS affords us, either through targeting mechanisms such as ELMS or net gain, and looking at nature-based solutions. And also, I think it's important to talk about the leadership that the combined authority can bring for West Yorkshire in creating a strategy that's greater than the sum of the parts that would have been otherwise. As far as questions go, I think if we've got points of clarification as we go through the presentation, it's fine to take them as we go along. But if it's a discussion point, I think we should probably leave it till the end. And on that note, I will pass over to Liam, who's going to take us through the bulk of the presentation.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Just share a screen. Just confirm you can see that for me.
Yeah, that's great, Liam.
Very much. Right, yes, so I'm going to talk about 2 things, the Nature Recovery Network and local nature recovery strategies, which you've already mentioned. If you do have a point of clarification, I can't actually see you right now because I've got my presentation and notes up, so just give me a quick shout if you do have a point of clarification through some of this. So first of all, I just want to start off with the Nature Recovery Network. So why do we need this? Where are we at? So nature's in decline, both nationally and globally. Losses of habitat species. And despite our best efforts, what we've done so far hasn't worked. Just over 10 years ago, there was a report called Making Space for Nature, often called the Lawton Report, and it focused on the idea that what we need to do is recover nature because it's isolated and fragmented, and we need to build a resilient and coherent network. And this is what this picture on the left hand side is. So you've got various habitats here that you're looking. It's a conceptual model of maybe how you might recover nature at a landscape scale. So you've got your various habitats that you might link up with corridors or create buffer zones, maybe do restoration or create stepping stones like here in the middle, and all around it, you're looking at sustainable kind of land use to make that more resilient. So the government is committed to a number of ambitious nature recovery objectives, which most of them are outlined in the 25-year environment plan. And it's got things like the recently announced 2030 species abundance target and the 30 by 30 commitment, which is the idea to set aside 30% of land by 2030 for nature. We don't know the exact details of what that entails yet, but we're expecting that to come forward soon. But one of the big policy pieces is this nature recovery network. So the nature recovery network is a single network across the whole of England. And I've put in here a definition from our Nature Network handbook, which I think is quite important to note, that an ecological network might be thought about the wildlife and the ecosystem services and getting those functioning together in a resilient and coherent way. But the see that definition. There we go. So yes, a nature network is more than just the ecology, although the ecology is very important and underpinning. It's actually about all those benefits that we can deliver for people. You know, some good examples: flood alleviation, recreational opportunities, and climate change adaptation and mitigation. Of course, the climate crisis and the ecological crisis can't be separated. You can't really solve one without solving the other. So we've recently had the Environment Act, which has some new levers, and the lever which I want to talk to you today is about the local nature recovery strategies. So these are a new system of special strategies for nature recovery, and the strategies, they will agree priorities for nature recovery, will map the most valuable existing areas for nature, and map proposals for creating or improving habitat for nature and wider environmental benefits. We expect there'll be about 50 local nature recovery strategies across the whole country, should I say, and each will be locally led. Usually we're expecting by higher tier authorities such as yourself, but definitely in collaboration. The Environment Act, in the first instance, places this duty on higher tier authorities, and the reason for that is DEFRA and Secretary of State is very keen for these strategies to have democratic accountability where possible. So importantly, how will local nature recovery strategies be used? Because there's no point in having a strategy if it doesn't deliver outcomes. And just this first line here, local nature recovery strategies have been designed with a new focal point for a broad range of funding and delivering activities so that we can recover nature and meet environmental objectives as effectively as possible. And this is quite important because what we're seeing in our work is a huge increase in complexity in the number and type of delivery mechanisms. Without an effective strategy, it will be very difficult to bring these together. And also that they will provide the underpinning framework for nature recovery, and once action has been taken on the ground, it will enable the network to grow over time. So if you imagine that the local nature recovery strategies are almost the constituent parts of the nature recovery network. And I just, this will either excite you or perhaps terrify you, but this is just an example of some of the complexity that we're starting to face in terms of delivery mechanisms. And this isn't even, in fact, all of them. So what we really want to do, is the idea behind the strategy is to try and bring these together in a vision that will really work for the area. Now, for me, it's very exciting, this bringing all of these together. We've got things that from my point of view, I'm quite familiar with, like countryside stewardship and environmental land management schemes, which some of the details are starting to be released. But there's also some new things coming along, which I'm sure you're aware about, like biodiversity net gain and things like conservation covenants. But also, really, again, going back to that idea of a nature recovery network, connecting a broader range of people. We're looking at bringing in different sectors into this, green social prescribing, wellbeing, level and up agenda and inclusion. And also another real big player that we're starting to see already making an impact in the sector is private finance. And with investors, they want kind of some certainty about what they're investing in, and local nature recovery strategy might help provide some of that certainty. So just a quick word about the pilots. So there were 5 pilots that were funded that ended in May last year. They covered a range of different geographies to sort of cover off different scenarios. And the closest one to yourselves will be the Greater Manchester pilot. And some key takeaways here. So working from existing networks is crucial, and early engagement is important. And we've certainly been trying to do a bit of that through the local nature partnership. And existing capacity in responsible authority is important to an effective local nature recovery strategy. So skills such as project management, facilitation, and GIS. And then also we want to appeal to, because of that complexity, local nature recovery strategy is going to appeal to a wide range of end users. So there's, you have to make sure that the guidance fits and the aims that those different people will want to deliver through it. I won't dwell on this too much, but there is a lot of information, some information. You can go visit the pilots yourself and look at the various maps. Northumberland's quite a nice one to look through. They've got a decent story map to look through. I think the one in Cornwall has sort of infographics, which are quite interesting. I do have access to the Manchester one. I don't think it's published because obviously it's a pilot, so for reasons of democratic accountability, because it's just a pilot, I don't think they wanted to publish it too much, but I think I do have a link that I sent to Daniel, but I can resend that out if that's one that you want to have a look at. And just finally from me, a quick word about the rollout of local nature recovery strategies and what we're expecting in the coming months. So first of all, first thing is to agree responsible bodies in principle with DEFRA. So just looking for an in principle agreement that this is something that you would like to do. Following that, we're looking for the publications of the regs and guidance. That's absolutely crucial because although the Act has been published, until that regs and guidance comes out, we don't really have a decent understanding of the process and what everything entails with the Environment Act. And then we're working with DEFRA to roll out some training for responsible authorities, but not only responsible authorities, local authorities and key partners, because it is a collaborative process. So the training is, although it's mainly aimed at responsible authorities, I think the expectation is there will be others, and it includes some tools and networks to help, and we're very much here to sort of assist this process. And also vitally, we need to have the completion of the spending review, because that will confirm the budgets that will allow the responsible bodies to move to a full agreement with DEFRA and the Secretary of State. And now I'll hand over to Rachel, if you're there, Rachel.
I am, thanks, Liam. You'll have to drive the slides though, if that's all right. So if you can advance the next slide, please. So I'm aware that you've seen the slides, I think, ahead of time, so I'll just make some very quick points so we get to discussion. There's 4 positive points, I think, about the opportunity. It's one around connecting the urban and rural communities across the area through the different catchments and environmental connections that we can make. It makes everybody working to a common goal, if you like. We'll create more healthy and vibrant places. We'll have safer people and will improve their lives simultaneously if we do the design of this well. And by thinking long-term and getting long-term commitment, then we can really make some substantive change. Next slide, please, Liam. So what does this mean in practice? It means more small actions, and a lot more small actions, I suppose, across all of our landscapes that will accumulate to big impacts. So these photos, on the 2 on the left, are images from the Colder Greening project, where we've work through that landscape around the river, and the other one is the Castle Hill at Kirklees, where again there are plans for landscape scale change that the trust is involved in, but there are many other positive projects. So small scale adds up to big impacts, and a good example of the type of project we're talking about, next slide please, Liam, is, for example, what was achieved on the air around the salmon well, it's not reintroduction as such, it's refreeing that environment for those salmon to get back up to their source. So this project was led by the Environment Agency, but again, it's showing how communities that on one hand could look quite different can be connected through these different environmental projects. It's really a wonderful engagement tool, and this also allows us to talk about the nature and the climate crisis together, health of our water courses, when is the water in the right place and the wrong place, and how can communities get involved in that. So next slide, please, Liam. The things that we thought would be most pertinent for the committee to be considering is, how do you prepare at this point? So we're still waiting for a bit more government guidance, but there are political preparations to be made around the degree to which there are local political priorities for the environment, the degree to which the local authorities across the area have already joined up, and is their join up cross-party, because it is really important that we've got long-term and consistent thinking to be implementing. These projects are expensive, but they also take quite a long time to implement and get the results from. So the commitment is a really important factor. So picking up what's already in place, are there opportunities to think bigger and have more impact if we do things together? And particularly in the political agenda, the degree that the politics and the senior officers in local authorities are joined up on this. Very important that you have that golden thread. We are interested to think about who are the key actors and partners. Obviously, we're here presenting Natural England have a statutory duty. We as an environmental NGO obviously have a huge interest in this being got right. There's the local nature partnership that's available for the region, and could they be a lead, or do you have other things in mind? How will it be resourced and coordinated? We anticipate that there's going to be some additional duties money that will come from government for local authorities, but will it be enough, and could it be much better, the impacts be better, if local money was also put alongside that? And who's available now to be able to start working on this and start forming a project team to be able to bring this together? And then there's some other principles to think about around, do we go data and map led? Do we go opportunity led? What's the balance between people power and financial power? Do we have pots of money and say, what do people want to do with it? Or do we listen to what people want to do and then try and find the money for it? So there's these type of questions that I think at this stage, it would be useful for you as the committee members and potential decision maker on this in the future to be considering, and then getting the foundations in place for being able to really accelerate and be ambitious around the strategy once we get the full go ahead from government and through Natural England. I think that we've got a couple more slides on the end, haven't we, Liam, with contact details and things, but that was mainly what we wanted to say, and give you some information around what we know is happening, some ideas we've got around how to accelerate it and take it forward and be prepared, but also be open to questions from you if we can be helpful at all.
Thank you very much, Rachel and Liam and Paul. I think I'm not sure if you're on the call from the start. You'll have heard those. If you were, you've heard there's quite some interest in making nature recovery a bigger part of the programme of this, and possibly exploring having a small group to do some work on that outside of the structure of formal meetings, and I'm sure we'd want to involve yourselves in that if that was appropriate. I'm aware we're losing a couple of people because of the time, unfortunately, but is there any immediate questions or comments for colleagues on this? Scott, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, yeah, I'm equally aware of the time, and I'm getting little voices downstairs saying, what are we having for tea and stuff like that. So, just as a brief one, and clearly, like, I think we've all got lots of questions we'd like to ask you, and it'd be interesting to sort of explore that given a bit more time. And I wonder if we can sort of manage that somehow in between meetings. But I guess just a pertinent point might be just to say, like, you know, what do we spend money on, carbon reduction or biodiversity, if forced to pick? Because, you know, clearly the climate crisis affects, you know, biodiversity in all its forms. So there's a really interesting clash there. And I know that's a big existential question for you, and I don't necessarily want to leave that one dangling. And I'm totally for what you do. I'm a mega fan of biodiversity and all that kind of work. But I guess just sort of like think about that as a wider point. But really interested to sort of speak to you more and have a bit more time to explore some of the knottier questions.
Can I just come back on that quickly? I think we recognise that the climate crisis is actually one of the biggest threats to nature and wildlife. So tackling the climate crisis, bringing emissions down is absolutely critical. So, we are supportive of that. I think the key thing is thinking about how all of those other investments that you are talking about from a carbon point of view can also have biodiversity benefits. So, for example, thinking about Northern Grid that we've just heard from, the way that they do some of those works that they're talking about, the way that they manage their infrastructure and network of land, and how they choose to design some of those interventions can either have a very negative impact on nature or could have a very positive one. So it's around thinking about it together and making sure that we make the best of those opportunities when we're making investments. So they don't have to be in opposition, they can be together, but it takes collaboration, and sometimes that takes a little bit more time and tolerance of each other's views. So a lot of, I think, releasing the impact is around people power and people collaborating well, more than it is about more money.
Sure, that's great. Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm chair. I'm going to have to drop out now.
Okay, thanks very much, Scott. Paul, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that in that, I suppose we've got to bear in mind that DEFRA will be providing some funding to support the LNRS process as well. On top of that, the support available through Natural England will have LNRS senior advisors, net gain senior advisors, inclusion senior advisors, who will all pitch in and to support the various strategies that are going to be across Yorkshire. But also, LNRS has a role in marshalling some of the resources and targeting some of the resources that will also help towards the climate crisis, such as in woodland planting, scrub regeneration, peatland restoration, and maximising the benefits of those things.
Thank you. Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, and really, Rachel, it's around some of the things that you mentioned, and that was about community, because I've seen firsthand some of the work that you've done with communities in my own ward, and actually getting them to identify some of the things that they can do locally, even if it's on a small scale, that can have a small impact, but lots of small impacts makes a large one. So, I'm very interested in actually how we bring the community along in identifying some of those areas that we can actually make impacts and make positive impacts that all join together make a big one. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, I think how we can join this up with other agendas is really important, isn't it? And you're seeing your example of the river there, thinking about the work, the sort of slow the flow work, natural flood management work in Calderdale. Obviously, some very obvious connections there too. I'm not quite sure if the slides were sent out in advance. I don't think so. So perhaps we can make sure they're circulated again, because that would be really helpful.
No, I didn't send them out in advance, but I'll send them out after this meeting.
Thanks, that'd be brilliant. And thank you again for your time. I do think there's more we can build on there, and as I say, hopefully we can involve you in some of that work people are interested in taking going forwards.
Yeah, Chair, we'd be very happy to be involved in anything future going on. So if you have future meetings or anything between meetings, Natural England, and I'm sure that YWT as well would be more than keen to get involved.
That's great. Thank you very much, and thank you very much, everyone. That brings us to the end of the agenda. Thank you all for your time and contributions this evening. Have a good evening. Further meetings if you're really lucky, and see you all soon.